Welcome to On the Spectrum podcast. My name is Nick.
I'm Steve.
And as I always say at the beginning of every podcast, me and Steve do not presume to be experts in anything whatsoever. We are just two human beings who happen to be on the spectrum, and we have opinions and ideas, and we're going to talk about them. But today, we have a special guest with us who I assume is actually an expert in a bunch of stuff, mostly because, once I tell you who she is, you will absolutely know. Welcome, Temple Grandin.
Hi, great to be here.
So, how's your day going so far?
It's gone just fine. I was in the airport yesterday. We had a 3-hour delay due to mechanical problems.
All right. And
so you wanted to talk about careers specifically?
No, I'm very interested in careers because when I was out working on designing livestock equipment on big projects in big, large beef plants, I worked with people that owned metal shops that definitely were undiagnosed autistic.
Okay.
Either ADHD, dyslexics, I worked with them. And they were some of the most smartest people when it came to visual thinking on mechanical equipment, especially like hydraulic equipment. And I talk about that in my new book, Visual Thinking.
Oh, cool.
And I'm very concerned that kids are getting screened out today because they can't do algebra. But I know somebody who builds big, gigantic beef plants as a corporate jet, and he can't do algebra. You see, there's two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part, and then there's what I call the clever engineering part, where you visualize how mechanical devices work.
Yeah.
And just on Monday, I was at a big beef plant in Texas, and the plant manager was desperate to find some people that understood hydraulics and hydraulic equipment. And that is pure visual thinking, understanding hydraulic equipment.
Yeah, like how all the hydraulic fluid flows through it and how it's going to operate.
Yeah, and makes the cylinders move, like on an excavator machine's got the cylinders. Well, you have a lot of hydraulic equipment in a meat plant because it's wet, so they don't want to use electric motors.
Right.
Have hydraulic drive units. And you have big power packs for those hydraulic drive units down in the basement. But then you also have a lot of just mechanically complicated equipment with cylinders.
Okay.
It seems like there's, maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like there's some social stigma when it comes to some of the hands-on careers or when it comes to working with your hands or blue collar, quote unquote, type jobs.
Well, I can tell you can make plenty of money in high-end skill trades. I'm not talking about roofing, laying floor tiles. That's just work.
Right.
I'm talking about
I've done both of them.
Design hydraulic equipment, electricians, plumbers, millwrights, metal workers who actually invent hydraulic equipment, invent mechanical devices, and patent. Now, real high-end skilled trades. And we actually have a gigantic shortage because a lot of them can't do algebra. Right. But I see these fancy advertisements for this fancy building in New York called the Baccarat.
Yeah.
Fancy silver glistening spire.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to be in that if the water pump doesn't work.
Yeah.
On the 40th floor.
Absolutely. So we need far more people that can do the job more appropriately.
Exactly.
So where do you
power off?
Yeah.
Water pumps don't work. You're not going to want to be on the 40th floor of that building.
That's right. So when it comes to finding people for these jobs, because you said, that can't do algebra, where do you think helping somebody who's on the spectrum or neurodivergent in general, where do you think that kind of stuff starts of preparing them for work?
Well, you have, first of all, I'm a big believer in developing talents in young kids. Okay. And too many kids are growing up today. They've never used a ruler. They don't know how to measure anything.
True.
How can a kid find out they're good with tools if they never tried them?
Very true.
I'm a big fan of putting all the hands-on classes back into schools where kids can try lots of different things. And in my book, Visual Thinking, I talk about the visual thinkers like me who are going to go into art, mechanics, and you're working with animals, photography. Then you have your pattern thinkers who are really good at higher math. They're your mathematicians, physicists, chemists, computer programmers. And then, of course, you've got people that think in words. And the first step is realizing that different kinds of thinking exist.
Okay.
I didn't realize that verbal thinking existed until I was in my 30s.
Oh.
And that was a shock to me.
Okay.
But I'm worried that some of the visualizers like me are getting screened out with draconian algebra requirements.
Right.
And the thing is, it's a different kind of thinking. And I've worked with these people. I've worked on big construction projects where you've got somebody that took welding in school, inventing mechanical equipment and patenting it. It has 20 patents.
Awesome.
This is stuff that educators don't see.
That's true. Because they're only focused on the lesson plan in front of them for a lot of.
Well, that's part of the problem.
Cases.
Now, if you're going to be doing orbital mechanics, yes, you have to hire math. I'm not going to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But
you'd be biased if most people aren't visual thinkers. It would be hard for them to.
They can't imagine visual thinking. I had somebody criticize my book, and I think it was a philosopher, because he said, well, different kinds of thinking doesn't exist. And I think this person was a hyper verbal thinker.
Understood.
And then you get into arguments about whether or not animals think. Well, if you're a super, super verbal thinker, you would have a hard time imagining how a dog could think without words.
Right. Because they don't have a language we necessarily understand. So how could you understand that they think to begin with? Yeah, I get that.
They definitely can think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's not, it's going to be a sensory-based world.
Yeah.
And I want to help the people that are different learn how to work. One of the biggest problems I'm seeing today, teenagers, is they're not learning how to work. They're not learning life skills. I was at the airport yesterday with a 3-hour mechanical delay, and I ran into a family of with a 13-year-old math genius, moved ahead in math, autistic. This teenager had never gone in a store and shopped by themselves.
Wow.
Yeah, this is real. This is yesterday. This is really bad. So what we did is we went over to by one of the shops, and I had mom and me stand like 25 feet away where we could see into the shop, and we sent him in there with some money. First time he'd gone in a store by himself. And the mom said, well, I have a hard time not just running in there.
Right.
I found out I picked the wrong shop. It didn't take cash, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, how would any of us?
And then I said to mom, well, he needs to be walking somebody else's dog. He's got to learn how to do tasks on a schedule outside the family. And this isn't being done. Maybe get a little debit card. Then he could have bought something in that shop.
Yeah.
I suggested the next time she was pumping gas to send him into the store and buy something.
Right.
And I've run into this over and over again. Smart teenagers on the spectrum never have gone shopping by themselves. You've got to be kidding.
I would think part of that might be due to, well, I mean, the world we live in now, where a lot of things are purchased digitally. People are buying things online. Maybe people don't go into stores as often. Also, parents, if they're having less children, maybe they're going to be more protective of their kids.
Well, this is the problem. The being so protective, the kid isn't growing. And I have suggested that, their kid get a job. And then there's certain things I want to avoid. I want to avoid the crazy, rapid multitasking jobs. Those need to be avoided. And also, long strings of verbal instruction don't work. Let them write down what they have to do on a pilot's checklist. That they need. It's sort of an external working memory. That's a support they need.
Absolutely.
They're not making a transition to independence and work. And this kid was getting all kinds of therapy. None of the therapists talked about having him start doing some stuff on his own. Now, we were 25 feet away from the store.
Right.
And could see right into it.
Right. It's not like you left him completely independent to run down the street. Yeah. I mean, you guys were still keeping a watchful eye to make sure.
We were 25 feet away, and you could see completely inside this small shop.
So would it be a fair assessment based on what you said, and I'm assuming you have more experience than I do when it comes to dealing with parents who have children on the spectrum, would it be a fair assessment that a lot of those parents aren't trying to give their child like self-autonomy and trying to teach autonomy?
Well, it's kind of the helicopter mom thing to the extreme. But I've run into this all the time. That's the second child. Now another 12-year-old I sent into a shop at an airport, and she bought a drink and brought me back the change. And we were sitting where we could see into the store again. And then I talked to another mom to have her kid run in the gas station store when she was pumping gas.
Right.
And the mom says, I don't know if I can get up the guts to do that. You're right there. You can see into the shop.
Yeah. Like if anything bad happens, you're right there.
You're right there. But but just learning how to talk to the staff in the store.
Yeah.
You see, these are things that aren't being learned. We're doing a really good job on academics, but having a bank account. I go back to my little allowance I had, my 50 cents I had for allowance.
Mhm.
This is really important. I was learning how to save when I was 8 years old to buy an airplane that was slightly more than 1 week's worth of allowance.
Right. And I didn't learn how to
That was
save
an
money until
important
last year.
thing to learn.
I think a lot of parents fall into the trap of trying to do everything for their kid rather than
That's
letting
the
them
problem.
be
Yes.
autonomous.
Yes.
And because you're not going to learn unless you do it on your own.
Well, I would say even more so, you're not going to learn to be independent until you do it on your own. You're not going to learn to really be independent until you're okay with making a mistake, until you're okay with failing to a degree. If somebody's always protecting you and keeping you from having struggle, whatever level of struggle that is, if somebody keeps you from making a mistake, then you're never going to learn how to recover from a mistake. And I think a lot of life skills, in my opinion, like that's what we're helping people learn how to do is deal with all situations.
Well, exactly. And I have a book here on kids' little project things to get kids doing hands-on things. I held up this paper snowflake at a educators Zoom call, little paper snowflake. Okay.
Awesome.
And I had a teacher ask me, what's going to happen to the kid's self-esteem if the snowflake fell apart? You get another piece of paper, try
you
again.
build another one.
Look it up on YouTube. Learn from your mistake.
I just build another one. Yeah, I agree with you completely, Temple. I agree with you completely on that. Like,
well, the kid went in the store and he wasn't able to buy anything with cash. I didn't know the store didn't take cash. It was a store that in other airports does take cash.
Right. Well, how did he deal with that?
We went in and we got him out of there.
Oh,
then I found out the store didn't take cash.
Yeah.
But at least he went in there by himself.
Right.
He was looking around and he was there by himself and we were 25 feet away watching.
Right. And that was the important part of that exercise.
And then he said, the mom said, well, he walks our dog. I said, he needs to walk somebody else's dog.
Yeah.
Where he's doing a task outside the family on a schedule.
Right. Absolutely. I think schedules and routines are not utilized enough for people on the spectrum who are autistic, but also just in general for most human beings. Like being on a routine, having a schedule for things is really good for anybody's mental health.
You see, if he has to walk Mr. Smith's dog at 7 o'clock in the morning each morning, he's got to be on time at Mr. Smith's house.
Right. Has to have responsibility.
Dog.
Yeah.
You see, where you're working for somebody outside the family. You see, it's more like a job. It's a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you got to learn how to communicate and interact with that other human being too.
Exactly. You see, that's part of the learning.
Yeah.
And I've had parents tell me that when their kid got their first successful job, working at an office supply store, working at a sporting goods store, that they just blossomed.
Yeah, yeah.
They just completely blossomed.
Oh, absolutely. I actually had a friend when their daughter was first diagnosed at a very, very young age. He had a lot of anxiety about it. He had a lot of questions about it. He didn't know anything about autism. And I'm talking about this is 15, 16 years ago, which a lot of us as parents who were just starting to have kids at that time, we didn't know a lot about it. Like we'd heard of it before, but like we didn't know anybody who had autistic kids because we were all just starting to have kids. And one of his concerns was, how am I going to get my child to XYZ? And my response was, well, don't get them, help them along with it. You know what I mean? But you've got to help them in the right way. You can't just do it, right?
Well, the thing that drives me crazy is the amount of people I've worked with. And I worked in heavy construction for 25 years. Mm-hmm. I was out on big projects, supervising installation of things I had designed.
Right.
Working with shops, designing a center track restrainer for big beef plants. Every big beef plant's got one of these pieces of equipment I helped develop.
Okay.
But people that worked on that stuff were the dyslexic, ADHD, or autistic, owned metal fabrication shops, owned them.
Right.
And then the school doesn't want to let the special ed kids take shop.
Yeah.
A liability where
because they're worried they might get hurt.
Owned the shops.
Right.
See, this is what makes me pull my hair out.
Honest to God, and I might sound a little discriminatory against neurotypical folk real quick, but it always seems like they're so governed by fear about everything and not looking at the advantage somebody might have or the ability somebody might have or what they can gain out of it. But it's more of like, oh my God, they might ruin something.
Is to get trapped in the label. Okay, you were diagnosed as an adult later in life, and you were in the military.
Yes, I was.
You were in the military, and there's a good chance that diagnosis would have kept you out of the military. You've gone into the military with that diagnosis.
Yeah, same thing with my diagnosis of bipolar as well. It would have kept me out of the military if I had been diagnosed prior.
Yeah, you see, that's the problem. And probably going in the military was a good experience for you.
Oh, I love the heck of it. If I could go back, I absolutely would. I loved it. I loved all the structure to it. I loved the fact that I love the fact that I didn't have to figure out how to match my socks to my outfit.
And what branch were you in? And
I was in the Army.
Specialty?
I was a tank mechanic in the Army.
Tank mechanic. Okay. That's a good thing to be in, because that's kind of transfer to car mechanics and truck mechanics at home.
Yeah. And actually, I ended up becoming a addiction counselor when I got out of the military. I didn't even use the mechanical stuff.
But I would, for the visual thinkers, I'd recommend trying to get in one mechanical specialty, even though we don't have tanks on the highway. The motors are motors.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Motors are motors.
We're on semis.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those skills would transfer.
That's true.
And we have a huge shortage of like diesel mechanics, and people
very true
now.
Yeah, very, very true.
Diesel mechanics make a lot of money too.
Oh, they do. Well, a lot of people are encouraged to go into social arts and social sciences more now, and they're told to go to college opposed to a trade school, and we've got a severe shortage of trained people.
The one place where you don't need college is what I'm going to call high-end skilled trades. Again, I'm not talking about roofing and floor tiles and flat work concrete. That's just hard work.
Yeah,
I'm talking about high-end stuff like diesel mechanic would be an example. Electricians, plumbers, also people that can invent and build hydraulic equipment. See, like this plant manager just a few days ago told me that he was short on electricians, but the thing he really wanted is somebody that understood hydraulics, because in that watery, wet environment, they use a lot of hydraulically operated equipment.
Yeah.
And I can tell you one thing: you build your plumbing too small, it's going to scream like a jet engine and be so hot you can't touch the power pack and have premature bad problems.
Yeah.
And the kind of person that's going to be super good at that is going to be a lousy student in math who took a course in it or just started working on the equipment and they just figure out how it works.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because you brought up the bad at math thing a couple of times. Would a person who is a visual thinker, would they almost always be bad at math, or would that person maybe be able to be good at math but still be a visual thinker?
Well, the thing is, visual thinking goes in degrees. A lot of people are kind of mixtures. So you've got visual thinkers that can do math, but an extreme object visualizer. I've seen this pattern many times, and I discuss it in visual thinking. Extreme visual thinker like me has trouble with abstract math. Okay.
Temple, can we use this moment to segue into a question I got when we posted online about interviewing you? I kind of asked people, what would they want to know about, what not. And we did try to keep the questions that we found to the topic at hand. You mind if I ask you a couple questions from our audience?
No problem. Go right ahead and ask them.
All right. So a Misty Schwaller from our Facebook said this is the first time that they're going to community college, and they were wondering, from your experience of going to college, what did you do to try to help develop friendships in college?
Friends who shared interests. One of my big breakthroughs in college with friends was this: we had a college-wide variety show.
Oh, that's wonderful.
In our college, and I did a silly song in it, and I made scenery for it. That got a lot of friends. That's an example of friends through shared interests.
Yeah.
It could be theater, band. It could be a chess club. There's a lot of clubs at colleges.
Okay.
Those are places where you can get friends who shared interests. Another thing that really helped me, I went to college that had really small classes. And I think for a lot of students, going to the community college and getting your basics out of the way in smaller classes. And I didn't realize how important that was until I went to Arizona State University, where here's a big university, and I saw 500 students line up to sign up for freshman English and freshman math. And I thought if I was stuck in a 500 student class, I would have been lost.
Oh, me too.
think
Absolutely.
community college for the, for the first classes is really a good idea. Get those basics out of the way in smaller classes.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the big university, the upper classes are smaller.
Usually. Yeah. I agree with you. I did the exact same thing. I went to community college for my basic classes. And then to get my bachelor's in psychology, I went to a university, which were much larger classes and a little bit harder to deal with at times. But I still got through them. And I generally had to talk to a lot of my professors. Now, I didn't know I was autistic at the time, but I was still expressing a lot of the same issues, though. Being surrounded by that many people because of all the extra chatter around me, all of that kind of stuff. I didn't know I was autistic, and I didn't even think about it, even though I'm like sitting there in a class and they're talking about it. But I still went to professors and asked for accommodation in that way.
Well, one thing I did.
Yes.
Is when I failed my first math quiz, I went to the professor. Students are not asking for help soon enough. I went to the professor. There was a small college. He tutored me in his office.
Yeah.
And in grad school, and I failed my first statistics quiz, I got help from another graduate student. Students don't ask for questions soon enough. Don't ask for help, I should say. They don't ask for help soon enough. That is the biggest mistake that they make.
Right. We're not proactive enough, if you will. Oh, yeah, I agree. But granted, that's a skill in itself, though, isn't it? Like being proactive about what you need.
Calling me advocating for yourself. I call it get help before I failed the course.
Yes.
Now, I did this book, Different Not Less, and it's 18 people diagnosed later in life telling their stories in their own words.
Nice.
And they all have jobs. What I'm saying with the labels is that I think the label's holding them back on the job front. Okay, like this kid yesterday at the airport, never been in a store by himself.
Right.
But where the diagnosis helps, and I've talked to lots of people other than people that are in this book, is relationships. It's almost a relief. Then they understand why they are different.
Right.
But I'm seeing too many kids getting so overprotected. I wish I didn't have to talk about shopping all the time. But I find that I have to. They're getting so overprotected, they're not learning these basic things.
True statement. And I think one of those life skill things, at least in my experience and what do I do for a living, one of the things that I notice a great deal is not just making connection with another human being, but understanding how to have a relationship, actually have a relationship.
Well, and this is where the diagnosis was helpful.
Yeah. On
the relationships, but I think on the teenagers, I think fully verbal teenagers holding them back. I mean, they're not getting jobs. When I talk to parents, they say we're thinking about it, and I say to them, "Who do you know that owns a shop?" Yeah. Okay, I want to avoid the rapid multitasking stuff like chaotic takeout windows. I want to avoid that. Also, the one accommodation they need is a pilot's checklist for any task with a sequence.
Agreed.
A pilot's checklist.
Yep.
I call it external working memory.
Yep. I do those a lot myself, especially when I have a new task. I've got to write down very specifically every little thing I need to do in order, and I leave it right in front of me and just go down the list. Like, I don't even leave myself for like simple tasks. I don't decide whether something's simple or not. Nope. I'm writing down every single step one by one, no matter how small or big the step is. And I just go through the list.
But there's been jobs lost, good jobs lost, because they didn't do the pilot's checklist. One was an electrician's apprentice.
Yeah.
And all they need to do is write down what switches and fixtures should be installed in different parts of this house.
Right.
In other words, you use a dimmer switch next to the door, you use a regular light switch next to the bed, just that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the job was lost because they didn't write down the stuff to install. And it's a very, very simple accommodation. Yeah. And if the boss thinks it's stupid, just remind them pilots need a checklist. I need one too.
Yes.
I think that's a really good thing.
That's a good way to do it.
It's mandatory for pilots.
Absolutely.
So actually that kind of segues into a question that I had.
Awesome.
Which is, how do you think employers can best juggle accommodation while maintaining I wrote efficient workplace. Maybe that's not the word I should have used, but I mean like not impacting. Yeah.
Well, the real simple accommodations are avoiding the rapid, chaotic multitasking jobs and the pilot's checklist.
Yeah.
All right, let's just start with the two simplest things.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what one McDonald's did, because I don't think in abstractions. The autistic lady worked at the cash register, but when the store got super busy, they switched her to cleaning tables.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. See how that's just a simple accommodation they made in that store.
So that way she wouldn't get overwhelmed if there was too many customers.
Right. Exactly. And then there's some autistics who might need sensory breaks.
Uh-huh.
Or they need to go outside behind the store or something and walk around. You see, and I think I see this.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the back doors of a shopping center, and they might be out there walking around by the loading dock.
Yeah.
I used to do that before I knew I was autistic. I used to go up behind. I worked in retail for a while, and I used to go up behind the store and then walk around outside by the lake. There was a lake behind our building, and I used to do it, but I didn't know I would get overwhelmed, and I actually had a panic attack a few times because I was getting overwhelmed with dealing with customers, and getting a breath of fresh air for 5 minutes would help me.
Absolutely. Getting away from all of it.
You just a little simple like sensory break.
Yeah, that's it.
These are things, then the other big thing we got to worry about LED lighting. Some people can see flicker on LED lighting.
Are you not supposed to see a flicker on LED lighting?
No, you're not supposed to see a flicker.
Oh.
And if you see flicker, let me tell you how you detect it. Take your phone out and photograph the room in slow motion, regular slow motion, not super slow motion, regular slow motion, play it back in slow motion. And then if you're stuck in a classroom with awful LED lighting, bring in an LED that does not flicker. Maybe it could be a headlamp.
Okay.
And you wear that in the class. Or you have a lamp next to you.
I thought fluorescent lights also flicker too.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And those are getting phased out, but the LEDs, some flicker, some don't.
Oh.
The other thing on sound sensitivity, it sometimes works, is if the person controls the dreadful thing that makes the noise, like the vacuum cleaner or the electric drill in the shop. They can go down the shop when it's not busy and just drill holes in all kinds of materials just to learn to tolerate the noise, because they are initiating the sound.
Right, because they're making the choice to do it.
And you desensitize yourself to it.
That's exactly right.
And I just talked to a young man about a week ago, and he said I was able to get rid of the headphones by desensitizing myself to the sound, but I still need sensory breaks.
Yeah, every now and
then. But
he
was able to get rid of the headphones, because if you wear headphones all the time, it just makes the sound sensitivity worse.
Yeah.
But you can have them with you. You can have them with you. That gives you control.
Yeah.
Gives you control.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the keys. So I'm trying to find the simple things that people can do.
Right.
To help, make accommodations.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that's within their power, their control to do and initiate. Absolutely.
Well, and simple stuff. You see people talking broad concepts about, well, they don't provide accommodations. Well, I've heard one case that talked, this lady wanted to get a Ph.D. in vocational rehabilitation, and an autistic guy lost a job at some kind of a shop. I don't even remember what they sold. There was some kind of retail shop. And then they said, well, we'll just give you another autistic person. But that drives the shopkeeper crazy, because they have to train them.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what was wrong? And this particular person could not stand the sound of a single Christmas carol playing on the radio or on the PA.
Okay.
Well, okay, but if you ask some questions, then you can find out, okay, well, maybe we take it off the playlist. Or you put your headset on when that plays.
Right.
Okay, so that's something that simple would have saved that job. But you see, we talk about accommodations in a broad way.
Right. I actually think far too often we talk about stuff in a broad way. We need to get very, very specific about everything. Far more specific about every subject.
And maybe if it was something with a playlist, we could have taken that carol off the playlist, or you can have your headset and put on the headset when it plays.
Absolutely.
I know.
But you can't fix it until you find out what the problem is.
That's exactly right.
Christmas carol, a job was lost.
Yeah.
I know a specific accommodation for myself that I usually let people know that I work with. I ask a lot of questions, and some people can find it irritating or annoying or feel like I'm questioning their authority, especially if they're superior, if I ask a lot of questions. But it's because I have a need to clarify and be specific about what it is you want me to do.
Yeah.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so some people will take that as me being incompetent or me being defiant And so they'll take it the wrong way
Yeah.
and try to explain to them, I'm asking because I need the clarification.
Right. It's not because you're trying to challenge their authority
No.
in some way.
I've
been accused of that before, and all I was doing was asking questions.
I also have gotten spoken to before about wearing headphones or having something in my ears, because if I'm working long periods of time in a noisy environment, sometimes if I'm not required to have to speak to somebody at that point in time, I like to have something where I can have something else that I'm listening to instead of what's going on around me. But I've also had people not okay with that as well.
So I got a question for you on that, because it just occurred to me as you described that when we used to work at that certain place together, doing that certain thing, which I'm not going to name where because I don't want to put no advertisement out for them. Was that one of the reasons why you'd get so stressed so quick?
What do you mean?
Because it was really loud in there.
I'm very sensitive to sound.
Yeah,
so,
but where we worked together when you were my boss, there was a lot of sound going on, and it seemed like when you walked in the door very quickly.
What kind of a place was this?
So we repaired and took jobs over the phone for ABS braking systems on cars.
It was all.
So you were scheduling the jobs or fixing the car?
A little bit of both. So it was just a big open like warehouse kind of room.
Okay.
And so half the room was used for the people repairing, which was kind of loud most of the time.
It's like soldering and
all the soldering and stuff like that. But then there was this set of desks in this open room where there was like 6 or 7 different people who were on the phones constantly. And at the time, Steve was the supervisor there. And I would notice, because we work in an improv group together. And so I was used to only seeing him away from work, and he always seemed, kind of jovial and stress-free most of the time. But when I worked with him, he very quickly got very almost seeming overwhelmed. Like he had that look on his face as if everything got to him a little bit too quick. And as he just described that, I kind of thought back of when I worked with him and that expression on his face. Yeah, sorry, that had nothing to do with his interview.
And the sensory things are real.
Yeah.
But there is some ability to desensitize.
Yeah.
If the person controls the noise, okay, like the racket that's in that shop, maybe make a good audio recording of that. Or it's dogs barking or some other thing.
Yeah.
Things I can't control. And have a really high quality audio recording where you can adjust the volume. And because when you control, that helps to desensitize.
Yeah.
And I was just talking with an autistic group that, looking at where research is going. And I think there needs to be a lot more research on how to treat some of these sensory problems. I found just through talking to lots of people in practical experience that letting an individual control something like a vacuum cleaner or a leaf blower turned it from the most feared thing to the fun thing to play with.
Well, when we as human beings feel as if we are in control, we can handle a hell of a lot more than when we feel out of control.
The secret to maybe getting somewhat desensitized is control.
Yes.
You have the headphones with you, and then try not to wear them. And then this one guy said he got rid of his headphones.
Yeah,
but he still needed sensory breaks.
Oh, absolutely.
He still needed those.
Yeah.
You see, and that's a simple accommodation. So you go walk around behind the store, or maybe the break is to put on the noise canceling headset, play the music for just a little while.
Right.
But I want to figure out a way, the practical way to help make these things better.
Yeah.
What annoys me, that I was just looking at the research on sensory just recently, is they have all this stuff that say it's a problem, but nothing on the treating it.
Right. On what to actually do about it.
Well, I think part of it is exposure to the noises they don't like, but the person has to control it.
Yes.
Whether it's a recording or an actual thing like an electric drill.
Yeah.
The person has to control it.
Right.
I couldn't stand to be touched, and I used my squeezing machine to help desensitize me. I control the squeezing machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this control is really, really important.
Well, it's fundamental to most people to feel like they're in control of things. But for us on the spectrum, we're constantly inundated with things that we have no control over. So what you're saying makes complete sense to me of once we give the person the control over something, they're able to then manage a lot better.
But something like a noisy shop, the general shop noise, you'd have to take an audio recording.
Yes.
And then when you're at home, you could work on gradually playing it. And it has playing it louder and louder, but it has to be a full spectrum quality audio recording.
Right,
it's going to have all the nasty high frequencies in it.
Yes.
Because it has to relate to
real
life. If it's like all audio is too poor quality, it's not
It
gonna.
has to be a high quality audio recording. That's what it would have to be.
So
I
not
think
like a
I
Sony
notice-
Walkman.
I notice anything new, any sound.
Yeah.
You notice I'm easily distracted, but
You are.
I can pick up on any sound, no matter how far away it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I notice things that shouldn't be there. Like I don't
Yeah.
care where I go, where there's computers. If there's a gray box in the middle of the screen, it usually means something's wrong. I instantly see those. Yep, and I'll read.
I heard you on another show
It's
talk about.
something that shouldn't be there.
I heard you on another show talk about something like that at an airport. You noticed something on a screen at an airport. You instantly noticed it when other people might not have necessarily.
Well, like it was, for example, the gray box was in the middle of a sign that had airline's name on it.
Oh yeah.
There's a gray box in the middle of it. I will instantly notice that.
Right.
Or let's say pixels are missing on electronic signs.
Right.
Or they're the wrong color.
Right.
I instantly notice that.
Question on that. Is it because the image has now changed from what you know it to be in your mind, or is it just because there's something different about it?
It's something that shouldn't be there.
Right.
But imagine if you're a
Okay,
visual.
I can think of one last night. I went by this place called Majestic Roofing, and they had some beautiful pictures on their electronic sign, and there's a big piece where a square where the pixels are missing on that sign.
Yeah.
I just noticed that last night coming home from the airport.
Well, I mean, if you're a visual thinker, you would probably pick up on that stuff more easily, especially if you make patterns. Because I know you've talked about how you're able to relate to patterns through images in your head, and you make connections based on the images and the way that you think. So if you know what those things typically look like or what they should look like because you're a visual thinker, then you're going to pick up on all those differences a lot faster than other people might.
I would think so too.
But things that sort of shouldn't be there,
Yeah.
I will notice.
Almost out of place seeming.
Dumb things. Like one time I was at the airport, I looked out the window, and there was a drink cup, a paper drink cup. It must have been 6 months old, that was sitting on the concrete base that held up the jet bridge. I mean, it's the dumbest thing. And I noticed that. An ancient paper cup of a big jumbo Coke sitting on the concrete pedestal thing that holds up the jet bridge. And I'm going, oh, that's an old paper cup that's been there.
Right.
For
And
a
most
long,
people would
long,
just
long
ignore
time.
it. Yeah, most people would just ignore it, not even necessarily see it as being out of place or anything, but you saw it as something out of
I saw
place.
it, and it was the dumbest thing. It wasn't anything that was going to hurt anything. It was
Right.
an old, ancient paper cup.
I can relate
But I
to those
saw that.
moments. Yeah, I can relate to those moments.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you might have already answered this question because
we
you
had
were
those
talking
questions.
about you were already talking about education as it relates to an exposure as it relates to careers.
I got interested in the cattle industry. I was exposed to it as a teenager. I come from a non-ag background. So what that brings up is teenagers, you've got to get exposed to things. This is why I'm so concerned about taking all the hands-on classes out of the schools, like sewing and cooking and woodworking and art and music and all that stuff, theater, is because kids aren't getting exposed to enough stuff to figure out what they might like to do.
That's true.
So that's my question is, do you think that that's the biggest challenge with matching people on the spectrum with a career? Or do you think that there's something it's something that's a bigger challenge or a bigger issue?
You mean the exposure
I
thing?
think let's say you have an autistic kid, it's the math kind of mind.
Right.
They need to be moved ahead in math. That's what needs to be done. Moved ahead, maybe several grades in math. I'm not suggesting putting a third grader in high school, but maybe he needs high school math classes on a laptop in the third grade classroom.
Right, because they're that advanced in math.
Because it don't make them do baby math. They will turn into a behavior problem if you do that.
And that's kind of what happened with me in school. Is I ended up skipping classes a lot. I had a lot of behavior issues because I got bored. I did have problems with math, mainly because for me, I couldn't do math unless I was trying to solve a problem. If I was doing math
practical, right?
If I was doing math in a science environment, I could do it. But when I had to do math for the sake of math, I had problems with it because I'm like, I'm not trying to actually accomplish anything.
That'd be functional math at that point, opposed to just doing the problem.
Well, that's the problem. A real abstract algebra where nothing is functional. I can't even remember it. And then you have the kid that's a math whiz, and they just look at it and they see how to do it. And then the teachers want them to show step by step, but that's not how math kids think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you show me a formula but don't tell me what it's for, I can't use it. I don't get it. Like, I can barely plug in the numbers. But if you tell me what it's for and why this is important to do, I'm way more committed to that.
Something like pi times the radius squared. Well, you have to have that for sizing hydraulic and pneumatic cylinders.
Oh.
Now, when I say that, I see the cylinders on different kinds of equipment.
Okay.
But maybe that's algebra. I know how to do that.
Yeah.
But I see air cylinders and hydraulic cylinders when I say pi times the radius squared.
Right. You actually visually see it in your mind.
Oh, I see them. I see them.
Right. And other people who don't think the same way that you do might have a hard time understanding that.
I can imagine.
You got to find the area of the cylinder to figure out what size cylinder you need and what pressure you need of either air or hydraulic.
Yeah, cylinder.
Okay.
I don't know why I had to do that, but every time you said cylinder, Temple, like a big question mark in my head. So I was like, no, yeah, okay, cylinder. Yeah, so I actually had to give myself a visualization for it. I don't know why.
Well, I see an actual piece of equipment, like a big excavator. I see an air cylinder on a piece of equipment in a meatpacking plant.
Yeah.
It's not abstract.
Right. I actually had to draw it in front of myself. I don't know why, I just did. All right. Don't question me, Steve. You didn't. I got it. Okay, so another question from Lisa Brew. Awesome name. Lisa Brew from also Facebook. Do you believe teachers should have specific training in autism as standard practice?
I think there's some things they need to know. Okay. And I think in specific examples. Now, the need for things like the pilot's checklist, avoiding long strings of written instruction. Okay. That is a must know. The other thing is the rapid multitasking stuff doesn't work. They need to know about the flickering on LED lights. Another little thing that can help a lot of kids with dyslexia is some kids complain about the print jiggling on the page. Here's a simple thing you can try. Maybe it will help 10 to 20% of dyslexics. See how this is pale light blue, real pale light blue? Try different pale colored papers and print the homework on that. Oh. Nobody really knows why it works, but I'd say 10 to 20% of the time in dyslexia, it works. And the child has to pick out the right colored paper. And you can also adjust fonts and colored backgrounds on computers.
And that helps them be able to read at that point?
What it does, it stops the print from jiggling. Now, I don't have this problem. I would guess that maybe kids labeled with dyslexia, only 10 or 20% have this problem. It's a very, very simple thing. Sometimes it works. And then the flickering of LED lights, the rapid multitasking, and the other thing that's really bad is long strings of verbal instruction.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to have a pilot's checklist. And if you actually look up those checklists, it's 1 to 3 words just to trigger the memory.
Yep. Just enough so you understand what it's asking you to do.
What's the next step?
Yeah.
And they're not written as narrative. They're written as bullet points.
Okay. That sounds wonderful, actually. Sounds absolutely wonderful.
And that's some real simple stuff that you can do that a lot of kids and even adults in the workplace, the pilot's checklist and the rapid multitasking, they're the two biggest reasons for losing jobs because those accommodations are not done.
Absolutely.
Things to do.
I never really thought about it until she just brought it up. But at a lot of jobs that I've worked at, they ended up tasking me with creating training materials because I'm very good at putting together step-by-step list.
Yeah, making things methodical.
And I would, have images or whatever supporting materials for each step. And it just occurred to me, maybe that's part of the why, I don't know.
Maybe that's why you're good at it.
Yeah, I like putting things step by step.
I'm very good at writing articles on things like how to handle cattle, just giving instructions.
Right.
That's the same sort of thing. But those are things where I've seen a lot of jobs lost because they did not have the pilot's checklist, where the pilot's checklist would have saved the job.
Absolutely. I've actually heard that story quite often just by watching a lot of TikTok and listening to people's stories. A lot of people talk about losing jobs because they just didn't 100% know what it was they were expected to do, and they would have really appreciated somebody just writing it down.
The bosses, they get mad and says, well, I've already showed you how to clean the ice cream machine 5 times. Are you stupid? I have heard that kind of stuff over and over and over again. And this is where a pilot's checklist with bullet points of the steps, the take apart steps, the cleaning steps, then reassembly steps would solve the problem. It's a very simple accommodation that would save a lot of jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fallout of losing a job, because there's a lot of emotional fallout to losing a job for people. And it would save a lot of that too.
A common thing that people on the spectrum will say is like they were let go, and they're usually given some sort of vague reason as to why they're being let go. Like, you know, oh, it's just, you know, you're just not working out, or it's not working out.
Yeah. I almost lost a job at the Farm Arrangement magazine where I was livestock editor. Changes of bosses is a dangerous time for people on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Real dangerous time. And one of my very first jobs, I almost lost it. They sold the magazine, and we got a new boss, and the new boss thought it was weird. And Susie, who worked in graphic design, I think we're pretty sure she was on the spectrum. So we've got to get a portfolio put together of all your articles to show Jim, the new boss, your work. And when I showed him the portfolio of all the articles, he gave me a raise. You see, that's an example of showing the work.
Right.
Showing the work. That's another really important thing.
Yeah. Being recognized for the effort opposed to what they expect you to behave like.
Not just effort.
Yeah.
Articles I had actually written.
Yeah.
He didn't know how many articles I had written for that magazine.
Oh.
Until we put them in a great big scrapbook and showed them the new boss the articles.
Okay. So he was impressed by how much you've contributed.
Yes. After we made a scrapbook of all my articles that was really like 2.5 inches thick of all my articles.
That's awesome.
Then he was impressed. But you see, just interacting with him, he thought I was weird and crazy.
Right.
But then when he actually saw my work, then I learned in my cattle handling work to show off my drawings. That's what I did. Yeah. I sold my work by showing my drawings. That's how I did jobs. There's an example of one of my drawings right there. It's a little ripped right there. But I showed my drawings.
Right.
That is what I did.
There you go.
Yeah, I think with changing of bosses too, you have to worry about change of routine or expectations. If I had bosses who come in and I'm used to doing things a certain way, and my old boss was okay with how I was doing things, but now you have a new boss, their expectations might be different, and then it's hard for us to adapt to what the new person's expectations are, or they get frustrated with you because they want you to do things a different way.
And there was a fencing job lost when the guy got a new boss, and he goes yak, 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 and the guy built the fence wrong. You see, this is where pilot's checklist would have saved that job.
Absolutely.
Changing bosses is dangerous.
I had a new boss come in once and called me a homo habilis. Homo habilis, sorry.
And I will not make a joke about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, like, when it... Nope, I completely lost that thought. What is...
It's all right.
Every single time we record, I've got like this cool question or thought I was going to say, and it's like, boop, gone.
He's starstruck right now.
I am, actually. I kind of admire you, so yes.
No, but this is the problem. And these are things that have come up over and over again where jobs have been lost.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will be some good things.
Well, actually, speaking along those lines of like working a job and all that jazz and having life, there's a Dr. Sarah West who asked the question, how do you balance downtime with the research and the teaching that you do and all the speaking engagements and stuff? Like, how do you balance having downtime for yourself or personal time with all of the other responsibilities and like work stuff that you do?
I don't stay up all night doing stuff.
Awesome.
Never have.
Good.
No, there's a point where, you can't be doing all-nighters all the time. Well, I did do a 3 a.m. get up the other day on that flight that was 3 hours late.
Right.
But that's the kind of stuff you can't do on a continuous basis.
Yeah. Every so often, but not often. Okay.
Yeah, you just cannot do that. You're not going to function.
Okay, so make sure you get adequate amount of sleep and keep it as a routine.
You've got to get adequate amounts of sleep.
Okay.
That's what you absolutely have got to do. And then you're just going to have to say, well, I've got to schedule some time where I can just do some stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I've got to do.
Okay. So on that note, Temple, what do you do for fun? If you don't mind
I
me
like
asking.
to see some science fiction movies. That stuff I like to do.
Yeah, science fiction movies.
Yep, I like science fiction movies.
Awesome.
Well, I thought Avatar was a great movie. I loved that.
Did you watch the new one?
Yeah, I sure did. I watched them both.
Nice. Did you like the new one? Because I haven't seen it yet.
I liked them both.
Okay, good. Good. Schedule.
Liked them both very much.
Nice. So if I can ask, do you like Star Trek or Star Wars more?
I liked classic Star Trek. That's what I liked.
Nice.
Loved Mr. Spock.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was more of a Data guy.
You really were.
Next
generation.
Well, I liked Data too. I liked him. I also liked Data.
Yeah, but Spock better. Absolutely Spock better. But you're also younger, Steve.
I related to Data because he's always trying to understand people's feelings.
Yeah, but Next Generation also came out at a time in your life, at least age-wise, where you could identify with him more. And like I was shown the original Star Trek series before Next Generation even came out. And so I was always like, oh my God, he's got a real job and no emotion.
Well, that's just it.
I mean, I was like 8 or 9 when I first got exposed to the original Star Trek. So like, I don't know, all the science talk didn't impress me, but this person who thought so logically and didn't rely on their emotions, in fact, talked about how, no, you've got to keep those at bay, that appealed to me at that time.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing is but I want to see kids get out and be successful. One of the things that's given me meaning in life is having an interesting career. And right now, I got to thinking about, I missed my appointment yesterday with the New Zealand farmers, but I think I helped an autistic 13-year-old learn some independence. He went in his first store by himself yesterday. Yeah. So maybe that 3-hour delay was the best thing that ever happened to that kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might have been exactly what was needed to happen. Sometimes people get put in our path for a reason.
Baby steps. I'm not talking about go over to another concourse or something like that. I'm talking about a store that's 25 feet away. And you can
absolutely.
So you were talking a lot about visual thinkers. I know you talk about different types of thinkers. I've listened to some of the stuff that you talked about on other shows and some of the videos you have. As far as matching up careers with different types of thinkers, besides visual thinkers, what do you think types of careers match well with other types of thinkers?
Well, let's just talk about that. Now, of course, a lot of people are mixtures. The extreme visual thinkers, it's going to be the real high-end skilled trades. I've heard of several have gone into real high-end custom cabinets, like for kitchens. Yeah. And that's been a really good career. The very high-end skilled trades, photography, art, and then working with animals. The more mathematical minds, chemistry, physics, anything to do with computer programming. The more mathematical engineering, the mathematical side of engineering. Like, let's go back to our food plant. The clever engineers like me design the mechanical equipment. The mathematical engineer does boilers, refrigeration, power, and water requirements. Right. You see, you need the whole team. And then your word thinkers, all kinds of things. Psychologist, teacher, lawyer.
Wait. You got to be a word thinker to be good at psychology?
Well, a lot of psychologists tend to be word thinkers.
Oh, okay.
That's not always the case.
You were scaring me there for a minute.
No, that's not, because I was a psychology major as an undergraduate, and I had to go into psychology because I had to drop a physics course because I couldn't do the higher math. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I just got into it because I'm wicked fascinated by like why people behave the way they do. Like that's been one of my grand obsessions.
Brain classes that I found extremely interesting.
Oh, okay. Like the actual biology of the brain?
Biology. I loved biology in high school. It was one of the few classes I actually got a decent grade in. And the other classes I goofed off and I got bad grades in.
See, I was the exact opposite. All of the like more empirical sciences, I was like, meh, whatever. But you give me a good philosophy class or a psychology class where we're discussing behavior and potentials of why somebody's behaving that way. Man, I loved it, and I got great grades in those.
But philosophy is very highly verbal. And one of the people that criticized my book, Visual Thinking, was a philosopher. And he was saying there's no evidence that there is such a thing as visual versus verbal thinking.
Oh, I will not make that criticism. I'm not as smart as that guy.
This would be someone ultra verbal thinker.
Ooh.
Can't imagine thought without words.
Oh, well, okay. I can definitely.
Yeah, most people are mixtures. You're going to be more of a mixture. You're more in the mixture.
Oh, yeah.
But what happens on the autism spectrum is you're more likely to have an extreme mathematician, an extreme object visualizer, or you will have an extreme word person that knows every fact about baseball.
Gotcha.
And where these people can be really good in the job world is what I call quiet, specialized retail.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're fairly quiet, selling cars, selling auto parts and memorizing every part number, selling sporting goods, office supplies, things where they're recognized for their knowledge of specialized merchandise. And all of those kinds of shops are relatively quiet.
Yep. I did excel when it came to selling things. Not that I'm trying to relate all of this to myself, but I'm still doing it anyway.
Well, you see, we're both bottom-up thinkers.
Yeah.
And I've had people complain that I just talk about myself, but I'm talking specific examples.
Yes, you are.
And those specific examples that I just gave you, what I call quiet, specialized, real retail, are real examples.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I can understand it completely.
We're successful in those things.
And it's funny because my dad is an engineer. He did electrical engineering. Yeah. But now he works with his hands, but he's always been kind of hands-on, create stuff, whether it's electrical engineering or carpentry. He has to build stuff or put things together. And he has, he's able to conceptualize what he wants to do.
Oh, yeah.
And put it together.
Yeah. And actually, the few times that I've talked to him about stuff like that, he was always like, I'd have to show you how to do it. Like, it's not that he lacked the words to communicate it, but it was just far easier for him to show opposed to talk me through it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the few times. I mean, I generally don't talk about work stuff with your dad.
I have my suspicions that he may also be on the spectrum based on a lot of the social issues that I've had my whole life. He also has and has had, but he doesn't seem to recognize it. So
you know what? In the most simplest of terms,
recognize that you've got to change. I had a guy that was brilliant on building equipment. And it owned a metal fabrication shop. I never forget the night I had to drag him out of a client's shop because he was mouthing off and the client was in the other room. Never forget that night.
Yeah. I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can. Some of us have a hard time shutting up. Like, I'm just going to say it that way.
I dragged him out of that shop and I said, we're going to go outside far away from here and you can tell me how stupid the guy is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But not where he can hear you in the next room.
Right. Well, sometimes we lose context of where we are and the words just kind of come out.
Problem. We were in a place where making uncomplimentary remarks about an employee of the client is not a smart thing to do.
Right. I think we can relate to moments like that.
Not always
Steve.
Great at recognizing those things. I've gotten better as I get older. I start to
learn how to be a bit more diplomatic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's been a struggle for me most of my life, is learning to be a little bit more diplomatic, if you will. I would actually say far more diplomatic than I've ever been. Like nowadays, especially with the job I do now, I got to really figure out how to word things a certain way. When I was younger, things just fell out of my mouth.
Well, I was just going around calling everybody stupid and things like that. And what I learned is that the word thinker doesn't see where something can go wrong. I'll give you a simple example. I was on an airplane. I couldn't believe this business person did this. He set a plastic cup of water on his open laptop while we were flying.
Why?
Well, because it was convenient. But if we hit one bump,
it just falls over.
It's going to go right on the keyboard and wreck the laptop. Okay, that's a simple example of seeing risk.
Yeah.
I'm like going, I can't believe you did that.
It goes boom, like one small little bump of turbulence, and that thing goes over.
Or I just
forget about it. If somebody bumps
into it, bump the tray table or something, it's going to fall over. Or the person behind him puts the seat back. I guarantee you that water's going to spill.
Yep, absolutely. And you can't control any of that, but he wasn't even thinking about that. He was just like, nope, just let me put it right here.
On the open laptop next to the keyboard, a plastic cup of water.
Maybe the laptop was thirsty.
Well, I don't think the laptop's going to be improved by having water spilled in the keyboard.
Yeah, it probably won't be improved, but everybody sitting around that guy at least will get a little good laugh out of it. Yeah. Okay, let me rephrase. I would find it funny if I watched that glass fall
somebody
over.
put the seat back and about break a laptop.
I've seen the two.
I do have a question I just thought of because I don't necessarily understand this part of it, but you mentioned several times that visual thinkers could possibly work with animals, that they might be good at working with animals.
Well, because animals don't think in words.
Right.
And that's the reason. Now I've got another 15 minutes. I'm going to have to get on another call.
Oh, well, didn't mean to take up a lot of your time. Didn't mean.
Some of the, you were probably wondering why I was looking down. I was texting them, telling them that. Okay. I was texting under the desk to tell them that
How dare you?
Then Temple, we thank you very much for your time.
Well,
as much as you've given us.
Do you have any other questions from your listeners?
No, I don't have any more questions from listeners. Steve, do you have any more?
No, not at the moment. No.
Okay.
Well, I want to help the people that think differently, to help them get into good careers, and some of the tips I've given you on the accommodations, very simple accommodations that will help lots and lots of people.
Absolutely. Can you hold up your two books one more time?
All right. Well,
just because I want to make sure people get to see them appropriately.
I'll put a link to if you want.
These are the visual thinking. That's my book where I talk about the different kinds of minds. That just came out last October. Different, Not Less, is 18 individuals diagnosed later in life, all employed, describing their experiences in their own words. I was basically the editor of that book.
I actually want to get that book now that I know about it.
And I actually got a lot of insights editing this book.
Yeah.
Reading other people on other people's stories, and they have a variety of different careers. They're not all computer scientists. There's some are in there, and where and how it helped them with the relationships. And in the visual thinking, I'm concerned about skill loss. I'm concerned about these kids getting screened out by all the math requirements we've got now.
Yeah.
And now I see the plant manager. He was standing in the doorway between his office and the conference room saying, yeah, I like electricians, but what I really need, especially since they're building a new plant addition, so you got to have some people that know hydraulics.
Yep.
Now, I'll tell you that's visual thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
The big mistake that people make with hydraulics is they don't make the plumbing big enough diameter. Runs too hot.
Okay.
It's a real mess.
There you go.
You see, and I'm also an associative thinker.
Yes.
See, verbal thinkers tend to be much more linear, much more top down. We have to do accommodations. See, being a bottom up thinker, I'm finding certain accommodations where they were not given, like the pilot's checklist.
Yeah.
Resulted in a lot of lost jobs. And then let's just avoid the chaos at the McDonald's takeout window. I'll try to avoid those jobs. Ice cream parlors are worked because the person makes one ice cream cone at a time.
And it's a step-by-step process to focus on. Yeah.
Those have been successful. And then the quiet specialized retail.
Yeah.
I mentioned those. Those have been very successful. Just straight engineering jobs. Designing all kinds of stuff. I'd say half the computer programmers in Silicon Valley are probably on the spectrum.
Oh, probably.
Those would be the math thinkers. Those would be the pattern thinkers.
Right.
But we need to take these kids that are good at math and move them ahead. Don't have them do baby math. People like me, when we were kids in the 50s, we had lots of hands-on stuff.
Yeah.
We're not getting that today. When kids are growing up, no tools, not measuring anything. I've talked to a shop teacher just the other day, and he said spend 3 days teaching the students how to measure.
3 days to measure?
Don't know how to measure.
Wow.
Yes.
I remember that being like an hour when I took shop class at best.
Well, but you see, kids in elementary school are not learning rulers and tape measures and measuring with them.
Okay, so then by the time I got to shop class, I already had enough exposure to something like that.
But the problem today, I had a girl in my class last semester who had never measured anything with a ruler or a tape measure.
I mean, a lot of younger people who don't know what eighths or sixteenths are. They don't know how to read a ruler or read a tape measure.
That's the problem. That is the problem. And so they'll spend 3 days, 3 shop classes, just learning measurement now.
Right. Wow. All right. So it's definitely something that people need to be exposed to. I mean, absolutely, people on the spectrum need to be exposed to far more things.
To find what they're good at.
I wish I didn't have to keep talking about shopping and stuff like this. But maybe the fact that my plane had a mechanical problem was the best thing that ever happened to an autistic boy yesterday.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where were you when I was a kid?
Yeah. And I can only imagine his mom is probably going to brag about that. Hey, you know who I met who encouraged me to have my son go in that store? Well, I'm going to have my son do that more often.
Oh, well, yeah. And the mom, I'm standing next to the mom and she's saying, I want to go into that store really badly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, guaranteed. Her anxiety must have been sky high.
You know, and then we figured out he couldn't pay for it. I finally went in there.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing this where they want to do everything for the kid.
Right.
And they've got to, you know, and this is baby steps where you go in a store where you're right there, like the gas station store, for example.
Right.
You see, and I see it. I even figure out which pump and which gas station I would go to where I'm pumping gas, I could see into the shop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you got to keep an eye on them. Absolutely. Yeah. Got to be able to keep an eye on people.
But you see,
let me ask you the question, Temple. Did that mom recognize you or know who you are?
Yeah, she came up to me in the airport.
Oh, she
and
did.
they wanted to get a picture. She recognized me. And then I another time was a 12-year-old girl who had never shopped.
Oh wow!
And we were sitting in the gate room for our flight.
Yeah.
The shop was across the hall. We could see. I gave her a $5 bill. She went and bought a drink and brought the change back. And it was the first time she'd shopped by herself.
That's awesome.
That was another airport experience.
How big of a smile did she have on her face?
She was really happy, and she gave me the change for
right.
Drink.
She was able to do it on her own. That must have been amazing.
But we were right there. We could see.
Of course.
We were in the gate room. The shop was across the hall. We could see the entire front of the shop.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, this was a baby step.
Yeah. So one last question, if I can, about when people recognize you, because you are kind of a famous figure. How do you handle that? How do you manage that? Like, because can that be overwhelming to you at times?
Well, no, I figure I've got to always be on good behavior. People look up to me. They want to get a picture. I do it. I get stopped all the time.
Yeah.
And I do pictures.
Right.
And then I also use it as an opportunity to like talk to their kid and maybe give some advice.
Yeah.
Something like having that boy go shopping. I don't do that often. But when it's a kid, it's the kind of the right age, like a teenager. Yeah. I find out they haven't shopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'm going to have them go in the store unless I'm in a rush trying to get to the flight.
Of course.
But we had 3-hour delay.
Yep. And more than enough time.
Go talk to her. So that 3-hour mechanical problem might have been the best thing that happened to her kid.
Right.
And then I missed another appointment with New Zealand farmers. Yeah. Which I texted them and said, well, now it's 9 o'clock, the plane's going to leave instead of 6 in the morning. I actually booked another flight, but then the plane that was broken, I was going to leave at about the same time. And I wanted to go on a plane I was more sure would go.
Yeah.
But the bottom line was that was helpful to that kid because she said, well, nobody in therapy said that maybe he should walk somebody else's dog.
Well, yeah, of course they didn't say that. Or do a
task for somebody outside the family.
Right.
They've got to learn how to do a task on a schedule outside the family.
Yes, absolutely. There's got to be a separation.
There's less responsibility if you're doing it for your family.
Absolutely. Because you also know somebody's going to protect you if you make a mistake. But if you're doing it for somebody else, there's a little bit more pressure on you for it. Absolutely.
And you've got to make sure you don't let Mrs. Jones's dog get away or something like that.
Right. Because it's somebody else's dog.
It's somebody else, and when if it's 7 o'clock in the morning, you got to be at her house at 7 o'clock in the morning. You take Fido for a walk.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes having that pressure of responsibility can be a far better teacher than stressing the responsibility.
You know what responsibilities to me? My school put me to work cleaning stalls in the horse barn, and I put the horses in and out, and I fed them. And they made it very clear to me that if I left the lid on the big wooden grain box open, a horse can go in there, gorge on grain, and it can kill a horse. And responsibility was shutting the lid. This is responsibility.
Yeah.
Shut the lid on the grain box, and you put this latch down. There's a little thing you turn on it.
Yeah.
I did that every time I fed the horses. I made sure that lid was down and that latch was turned. and I'm now seeing the latch. Responsibility was making sure the grain box was closed.
Right. Absolutely.
I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
At that time.
And it's super important to have that. I mean, far too many people want to take away the stress and the anxiety of certain moments. No, we need to feel that. We
when I used to say the word responsibility, I see the big old wooden grain box.
Yep. Yeah, the association to the two.
Putting the lid down.
Yeah.
And turning the metal thing on the lock.
Right. Was it a butterfly-looking kind of lock thing?
No, it actually was a hasp. Like you put a padlock on.
Yep.
It was a hasp for a padlock. Well, obviously, it needed a padlock on. And the thing where you put the padlock on turned.
Oh, okay. I know what kind of lock you're talking about.
And then there was no way a horse could jiggle that and somehow get the lid open.
Yep. Yep.
And so first thing when I hear the word responsibility, I see that grain box.
There you go.
And it had to be closed and the little thing on the hasp had to be turned.
Yep. You had to clip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful.
And I was 15.
Yeah.
And I basically ran a horse barn by myself, 9 stalls every day to be cleaned. That's just work.
Yeah. That is.
And
dude,
putting the horses in and out of the barn and feeding them.
Yeah.
My job.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, Temple, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on our show and kind of giving us all of your experience and knowledge there that you've been able to give us.
Thank you very, very much. And
absolutely
it was great doing the show. I've got to get on this other Microsoft Teams call that I'm now late for. But I did text him.
Sorry about that.
I texted him. See, that's what
I'm so sorry to make you late for someone else.
We will put your books up in the. I'll put a link to your books. I'll go to your website. I'll find whatever links you prefer for your books, and I'll put them up in our.
That'll be wonderful.
Yeah, but but I had to text them and let them know. To let them know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you realize that I good at concealing the fact I was texting under the desk?
Actually, I had no idea. No idea.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah, until you told me you were texting somebody else, I had no idea.
But all I text was Zoom call gone over.
Yeah.
Just so they would know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do apologize. We went over, but honestly, I could probably talk to you for the next couple of hours, but I'm not going to, but I probably could.
You have to go now. It's been really, really great. Thank you so
much
Temple. For having me on the show. And I'm going to leave the meeting now, and I hope I've given people some tips that are going to help them out.
Absolutely, you have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Temple. Have a great day.
All right,
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So it was absolutely wonderful having Temple on the show. I can't believe we were able to get her on our podcast, but that was absolutely wonderful. I got a whole lot out of the show. Did you?
Yeah, I did have some more questions, but unfortunately we ran out of time. But maybe we can talk to her again in the future. I wanted to push her more in the visual thinking.
Yeah.
Which maybe I should just read her book, but I have a few questions. Some of the animal stuff was interesting to me, which I didn't really get into, but I can understand why somebody who's a visual thinker might be able to understand animals a little bit better.
Right.
But I had some personal questions because I've always had an affinity to animals and kind of a natural understanding of you should do this, you shouldn't do that around certain types of animals. Just being exposed to, I grew up around a lot of animals.
Oh, okay.
And I just kind of intuitively understood I could tell if an animal, I could tell how they feel or tell how they would react to certain things. And it just kind of comes. So.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I've been scared of animals.
But I don't consider myself to be a super visual thinker.
Based on the way she described those things, I don't consider myself a highly visual thinker either. I mean, when we initially talked about that idea, I thought I was, but based on the way she was talking, I'm that mixture thing that she was talking about.
Right, which is what I told you I thought you would be more.
I know.
But
I know.
All right, well, that was fun.
That was absolutely wonderful. I hope everybody enjoyed that interview that we did. I know we did. And please stick around for the next episode coming next week, which we will probably have at some point, and we're probably going to put up on a Monday, like we usually do. So thank you very much for watching the episode, and please keep watching or listening.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.